Have you ever agreed to something and immediately felt a pit in your stomach? You say yes when your entire body screams no, or you end up apologizing to the person who just hurt you. It feels like someone else is pulling your strings. The uncomfortable reality is that you are being managed, and it is happening exactly because of the trait you value most. Your empathy is being weaponized against you by people who know exactly how to use it. An emotional predator doesn't act on random impulse. They sit back and they study you. They are clinically mapping out your reactions, noting exactly when you hesitate, when you seek their approval, and when you fear rejection. Your desire to be a supportive person creates the specific blind spot that allows a manipulator to step in and direct your choices. They are tracking microscopic data points. A slight dip in the pitch of your voice, the nervous laugh you use to fill an awkward silence, the exact second your body language signals a need for validation. Once they gather this data, they build what is essentially a psychological theater. They write a script where they are the perpetual victim or the misunderstood genius, and they cast you in a role you never auditioned for, usually the guilty party or the permanent caregiver. Living inside this dynamic bleeds you dry. You spend hours agonizing over how to phrase a simple text message to avoid a blow-up, slowly trading away your own boundaries just to survive the day. You tell yourself you are just keeping the peace, but the peace you are keeping is a rigged game, designed specifically to exhaust your energy so you never have the strength to walk away. To dismantle this, modern self-help affirmations won't cut it. We have to look at the historical mechanics of power. Over 500 years ago, Niccolo Machiavelli outlined exactly how control is seized and maintained. He observed that capturing someone's will rarely requires a raised voice or an overt threat. Total control is achieved simply by knowing what the other person is afraid to look at and occupying that exact emotional space. You are operating with an unsealed gap in your psychological armor, a predictable trigger that hasn't been identified yet. The guilt and fear they project onto you are a manufactured spectacle. Once you recognize the gap they are targeting and seal it, their influence loses structural support. That brings us to step 1, brutal self-awareness. You cannot defend a perimeter you haven't mapped out. You have to identify the exact moments you surrender your agency. Consider the trap where a minor favor becomes an extraction of endless compliance. Gratitude calcifies into a rigid obligation, a debt they never let you repay. Breaking that chain requires step 2, strategic detachment. This is the ability to step back from a manufactured crisis and observe it neutrally, without sacrificing your core empathy. A manipulator survives on emotional urgency. When they launch a sudden accusation or burst into tears, they are trying to bypass your brain's logic center and force an immediate, unthinking reaction. Your strongest defense mechanism here is the intentional pause. When the pressure spikes, look them in the eyes, let the uncomfortable tension hang in the air, and say absolutely nothing. By stepping off their stage and watching from the audience, you deprive them of the immediate emotional response they need. You starve the dynamic of the very fuel it requires to burn. Which leads to the final and most disruptive tactic. Step 3. Become utterly unpredictable. Whoever is controlling you relies on a deeply ingrained predictive map. They know that if they apply specific pressure, you will eventually fold. Your only way out is to throw a wrench into that expected script. When they angle for their usual yes, deliver a calm, firm no. When they provoke you expecting a long, defensive argument, just leave the room. Give them total absence instead of a fight. You are breaking the stimulus-response cycle. Without the predictable reaction to rely on, their entire strategy falls apart, and you force their true predatory intentions out of the shadows and into plain sight. Implementing this will not be easy. In fact, it will be intensely painful, especially if the manipulator is someone you love deeply, like a partner, a parent, or a lifelong friend. The moment you enforce these new boundaries, they will escalate. They will launch personal insults, retreat into intense victimhood, or use agonizing periods of silence just to test your new armor. You must remember the difference between care and control. A love that requires you to submit your identity is emotional blackmail. Years of shared history and physical proximity never justify psychological violation. Stepping away from these toxic dynamics will bring a heavy, almost crushing sense of loneliness at first. But that temporary isolation is the necessary tax you pay to get your mind back. Write this psychological law down and commit it to memory. Kindness exercised without strict discernment is simply foolishness. True freedom means knowing exactly why you make a choice and outright refusing to let anyone else pull your strings. Head down to the comments right now and tell me, what was the exact moment you realized you were being manipulated? Verbalizing it destroys their power. And if this video woke you up, hit subscribe and join the emotionally immune.